Welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Taylor and today we'll be going over every book that I read in the month of August. But before I open the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you love all things books. I feel like in the month of August I found my reading stride again. Obviously it wasn't the best month emotionally and there were definitely some days there where I was just like, screw it, I don't want to do anything in life right now, but I ended up completing 6 books, which I feel like going into September I'm feeling a little more in the reading mood, taking it a little slower in life, trying to appreciate all the things that we have been given, even though the world is on fire and my personal life kind of like went to shit the last couple of months, but hey, that's how it is. So yeah, 6 books in the month of August. Let's go over our stats. I read 1 fiction, 1 fantasy, 1 nonfiction, 1 thriller, and 2 romance, 3 YA, 3 adult, and then 1, 2, 3 physically and 3 on Kindle. And only one of them was a particularly spicy read, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them were queer. We love to see it. We love to see a lot of queer and especially queer diversity in our reads. No 5 stars. I felt like towards the end there I kind of got stuck in a lull of sitting around the 4-star range. But we'll discuss that when I get into it. So let's go over every book that I read in the month of August. Loveless by Alice Oseman is a YA queer fiction focusing on Georgia, who has never been kissed. So when she goes off to uni for the first time on her own, she enlists the help of her roommate, Rooney, to help her find romance. And then along the way, she discovers what aromantic and asexual means, and she is coming to terms with discovering her asexuality and romantic affiliations. As well, on the side, we're also getting a little insight into her 2 best friends, as well as her new roommate, Rooney. There's a sapphic side plot. There's a lot of interesting things that go on in this story. So yeah, this one also features a wide spectrum of people on the aro-ace spectrum, because you're not just dealing with solely Rooney, who is completely aro-ace, like very much so at the very end. You've also got a bunch of side characters who fall somewhere in between. I ended up giving this book 3.75 stars. I really enjoy Alice Oseman's work. I still stand that Heartstopper is probably my favorite, followed by Solitaire after that. I still have one more of their backlist left to go through, and that was I Was Born for This. This one, I think, honestly, I don't know if it's just where I was emotionally at the beginning of the month, because, again, it's been a tough year or what, or if I just didn't necessarily connect too much to the characters, or maybe it was just the length of the book, because Alice Oseman's backlog has gotten a lot darker. But yeah, that's why I gave it 3.75 stars. I just wasn't necessarily as invested or connected into everything. But if you want a good exploration of queer platonic love and learning to love yourself despite your current sexual status or sexuality, this one's a good one. Deathless Divide by Justina Ireland is the second half of the Dread Nation duology, so I'm not going to go too much into what this is about. I'll explain to you what Dread Nation itself is about. So in the first book, or the setup of the series, it basically answers the question of what would happen if the zombie apocalypse took place during the American Civil War, so sometime in the early 1860s. And then about 10 to 20 years later, around the time of traditional Reconstruction, if you're thinking about historical timeline, or just after that, we are following Jane McKean. She is the daughter of a formerly enslaved individual, or at least a woman of color, and women of color are expected to be trained to be attendants, which are essentially just, zombie people who fight off zombies for rich white women. And that is where we kick off our story, and that's where I'm going to leave it. I will let you know that this series does follow queer characters. There's asexuality and bisexuality and so on and so forth discussing that. So if you're looking for a queer fantasy that doesn't necessarily focus too much on romantic elements, this one might be for you. This series is so good. This duology, it does deal with a lot of heavy topics. Obviously, discussion around race is very heavily discussed in here, so do keep that in mind. But it's basically, each book is divided up into 2 parts, and it's like each part is a new story in itself, even though you're still following the same characters and their story and their timeline. And you really shouldn't get attached to anyone in this series, because it feels like happy endings are far and few between the entirety of this series. Not saying we don't end on a good note, but that's up to you. But highly, highly recommend. 4.75 stars. I really think you should pick up this duology. The ABCs of LGBT Plus by Ashley Mardell is a nonfiction sort of guide to the different terminology and labels associated with the LGBTQIA plus community. It definitely focuses on a couple chapters around like the basics to gender, and then specifically sexuality and sexual preference versus romantic preference. There were a lot of terminology in here that I was unaware of, and I know that this was made, I think, in 2017, so some of the people featured in here or some of the terminology used may have changed or updated since then, but I found this one to be a good quick read and very informative if you're looking for a queer nonfiction to really like fill in the gaps in your like dictionary knowledge or lexicographic knowledge of LGBTQIA plus terms. This one might be a good one. And I don't rate nonfiction. This is the last physical book that I read, and that is The Killing Code by Ellie Marney. I finished the None Shall Sleep series, or what's out of the series, earlier this year with Some Shall Break, and I found this one to be the only other book that she had out, and it is a sapphic historical thriller. I will say, if you're familiar with None Shall Sleep and Some Shall Break, I will let you know that there is some graphic things discussed in here. However, the level of graphic and goriness that I feel like None Shall Sleep and Some Shall Break reach does not get reached in here. But essentially in this story, you're following Kit Sutherland. She was once the maid of Catherine Sutherland, but after Catherine passes away, Catherine tells her to assume her identity, and Kit gets recruited to be a code breaker in World War II, and you get a lot of information around what it was like being a female code breaker during the 1940s, during World War II, and all of the stigma around women finally entering the workforce, entering the war after it, and so on and so forth. But while she's there, not only is she having to keep her identity a secret, there's a bunch of government girls getting killed, and while the police don't seem to be connecting the dots of a serial killer, Kit and her friends seem to be putting the pieces together, and they go on their little journey to figure out how to stop the serial killer and try and find out who he is. And along the way, Kit starts to develop feelings for her supervisor, Moya. So there's a little sapphic side plot to this one. It also not only discusses women during the time of war, it also discusses women of color during time of war, and we have one character who's a part of the segregated unit that I think does a good job of talking about things. Is this like the most in-depth discussion on race? No, but it does feature that discussion in there. I end up giving this 4.75 stars. There's just something about Ellie Marney's books that I have yet to push it over to 5 stars. I really do enjoy this, especially if you're looking for like thrillers. I think of all the thrillers I've read, I think Ellie Marney has done the best job, but I'm not really a thriller reader, so do keep that in mind. But if you want sapphic, you want historical, and you want sort of like a Criminal Minds-esque Mindhunter sort of book, this one might be for you. Then I read Virtually Yours, and it's by various authors and illustrators. The authors and illustrators should be on the picture on the screen. This is a comicsology graphic novel comic that is featured on Kindle Unlimited. This one is interesting. I cannot remember the character's name, but essentially in the story, you're following this girl. In the story, you're following Ava, who is living at home. She's a young woman. She's trying to find a full-time job alongside the pressure of her mother putting on her to find a partner. And you're following the other guy. I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. I think maybe Max. He was a childhood star, but he's still reeling from the trauma of being a childhood star, as well as the trauma of his parents and his recent divorce from his abusive wife. So he enters into a new job with the Virtually Yours app that provides fake virtual boyfriends, and Ava is using the service. And while the two connect online, they connect in person, but they don't know that each persona is the same person. And you follow that storyline. I end up giving this 4 stars. I think it was a really good kind of emotional but lighthearted read, and it does feature a lot of queer side characters if you're looking for queer representation in your story. But overall, I feel like the jump in scenes from one scene to another were a little abrupt, so that's what held me back. But if you're looking for a short quick read with some heart to it, this one might be for you. The last book that I read was Where's the Smoke by Erica Alexander. This was the story that I ended up picking for my sapphic read this month. It is a small town, cozy, sapphic romance, and it is quite spicy. I gave it a 3 chili spice. And I will say the spice is hot in this story. But if you don't like it, if you don't like super spicy reads, this one may not be for you, because I feel like every few chapters there's a specifically spicy scene. But in this story, we are following Fee, who is a firefighter in this small town, who recently lost her grandfather. One day she tastes Angel's strawberry shortcake, and then she meets Angel for the first time and is just love at first sight. And then Angel pops back up in town a year later after Angel loses her grandmother, and let's just say they hit it off instantly and the chemistry is there from beginning to end, and it's just a cute, sweetsy little story. If you don't like love at first sight or insta love stories, this one may not be for you because the relationship goes from 0 to 100 quite fast, I feel like. There's also discussions around loss and loved ones and like fears around like relationships in this story, so do keep that in mind. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It wasn't giving me 5-star material, but I feel like 4 stars is a good place to put it. And those are all of the books that I completed in the month of August. I'm so excited for September because it is a fantasy fall and you will be seeing a fantasy reading vlog sometime soon. Let me know what you read in the month of August. What are you excited to read next month in September? And I will see y'all in the next one.